guys. Today we are going to go over our second initial way to calculate your splits. And this way is your goal splits. And that's what it says here. What I mean is like, if you have a goal of a time, this could be, in this particular example, we're saying the goal for this athlete is saying an 8:30 goal time, right? It could be 9 minutes, it could be 10:15, it could be 6 minutes, it doesn't really matter, right? But again, we're trying to choose a goal pace, right? We're either doing that because we're trying to create a challenge, or we're seeing if in fact I can hit a goal pace, right? Because like if I want to run a 9 minute, I got to set up my splits to see if I can even first do that and say, so that's what we're going to do. This first person is going to be a 08:30 goal time. Okay, how do we do this math? Really straightforward. How many seconds are there in 8 minutes and 30 seconds? There's 510. So we divide that by the intervals. We have 6 400-meter intervals. 6 divided by, or 510 divided by 6 gives us 85 seconds. 85 seconds is a minute 25. So that's how we're going to start this, right? In a mile and a half, this, in a perfect world, if you were the person who would run a 125, and so on, for the duration of their entire mile and a half, this person will run an 8:30, right? That's the goal, that's the hope, that's what we're trying to do. This is the math, okay? Now, anything above a 125 for each of these splits is additional time. Anything below that, anything below a minute 25 is less time. So that gives us an idea, because what we're trying to find out is where in these intervals is my body no longer buffering hydrogen. That's what it is. We call it, I don't even know what the hell they call it. So it's lactate threshold, or you know, that's what people call it. What the hell do they call it? No, like lactic buffering, but it's not a real thing. Anyways, the reality is that's what you're experiencing. You get the stitch in your side, you're out of your breath, you get a big pump in your legs, whatever it is. What it means is your body is not transferring oxygen through your lungs to your blood system through hemoglobin. It's being saturated with hydrogen, which is acidic, right? And so when your blood becomes acidic, right, I guess I call it like the lactic acid. Lactic acid doesn't exist. It doesn't exist in the body. There's no such thing as it. When your blood lactate goes up, because the hydrogen, your blood becomes acidic. So that's where lactic acid comes from. But that's the idea, is that's why a person can't train. That's why they're out of breath. That's why their legs are burning, is because their training that they're doing, not their tested, their training is different than your tested. Okay, here's how we know this. So when you go do your 4-mile timed run, it's get after it and go. When you're doing 6, 8, 10-mile training runs, potentially, you are not maintaining that level of acceleration. So if you are trying to create a certain level of hydrogen buffering in training, your average velocity needs to be a certain way. Because if you're running faster than your average velocity, you won't be able to buffer. Like in the test, I'm not super concerned about buffering, because the tested is an all-out maximal effort to see if I am buffering. So just by the fact of the matter is, we don't train the way that we're going to run the race. We train in order to improve our hydrogen buffering, so that when we do the race, we're buffering hydrogen and the result is a time that we want. But if all we ever do is run at the effort and try to run at the average velocity of your tested time, you will always hit a wall and stop buffering. And that's the problem, is runners don't run without monitoring their splits. So they always know where their maximal training effort is at, and if they're running into their tested effort and they're hitting a wall. So we want to keep pushing that training effort, because the training effort is what buffers hydrogen. Maximal effort does not. Maximal effort, tested effort, tests if you're buffering hydrogen. So that's why we don't run egregious miles in which we can't keep a pace. If you can't keep a pace, you're teaching yourself to run slower. So just by running more and more miles, where your pace is getting slower and slower and slower, you're teaching your body under stress, I need to run slow. Your training average velocity is way off. which is why people's run times keep getting stagnant, because you're training at a tested hydrogen velocity buffering speed. Okay, so if you're gonna do an 8:30 or whatever it is, you put your first 125 in there, your first split. Can I at least run my first 400 meters at the split necessary to get this time? Okay, awesome. Anything worth doing is worth repeating. So once I'm able to do it and I can repeat it, now I know that I've fundamentally at least got into my starting blocks with the right effort in which I am able to buffer hydrogen. Because if I can hold the run time, my training velocity is buffering. If I run this, and then I run this, and it's a 125, and then I run this, and it goes to 125, what am I doing? I am buffering, and I can hold that pace. What I can also decide to do is, if I'm holding for 2 splits, I want to drop a second on this and see. Maybe I get a 124. Maybe I get a 123, because if you do 125, 125, 124, 24, 24, 24, you just PR'd. Just by taking 1 second off of each one of these in the appropriate place. We don't shave seconds off of here until these are in our control and we're taking seconds off at will. Once we're able to take seconds off this back end, we know that, okay, let's take this to a 124 and take this to a 124 and see if then we can take a second off. And now every single time you run, you PR. If you're mindful of your training pace versus your tested pace, okay? Now when we're testing your pace once a week on a push-up, pull-up, sit-up, run, swim, it's an all-out effort, because then you'll see when you populate your splits from your run or your tested, you'll see where you're not buffering, just like we did in the video yesterday, okay? It's really, really basic stuff. And then we look at this too and go, okay, this is a really simple explanation of why mileage in excess of 20, 30, and like the ridiculousness of the absurd, unethical ridiculousness of 70 miles a week. This shows how ridiculous that is, because not only can a person not consume enough calories to run that distance and then do all the other training, at this point, that amount of mileage is assuming that your runs are all the same. And then we can just keep adding mileage, and that's how we're gonna increase this benefit. Adding mileage does not increase benefit unless you're buffering in that mileage. If you're not buffering in that mileage, you are just going to be slow, broken, and you're gonna be like, I don't understand why I'm not getting better runner. I just run all the time. Because if running made us stronger and made us better runners, there'd be no weight rooms in the United States or the world. If running made you stronger, there'd be no weight rooms in the United States. Running is the manifestation of the test. That's what we're trying to do. If you're being tested on a test, there has to be a difference between training average velocity and tested average velocity. And they need, because if you're not doing the right training to get the right buffering, you're not getting the training because you're ignoring the way to train. Because just adding mileage isn't going to make you better.